welcome to all of you to today's Empowered Aging Lecture. I'm Tom Quigley. It's my good fortune to work with a group of our neighbors with the Empowered Aging Committee. And we work with the assistance of Joy DeCalzo and the Residential Health Services Department here at Timber Ridge. This is the 13th lecture in this series of programs addressing the big questions and big decisions that we make and will be making as we age. Each of these lectures has attempted to give us helpful, accurate, and useful information as we wrestle with those questions, so that we can live fully until just before we die. Today's program is a collaborative effort with the Creative Memory Health Team, and it will focus on relationships with persons who are living with dementia. Concern here is certainly directed towards spouses and life partners of those living with dementia, but it is also intended for all of us who are a part of one community here at Timber Ridge, and how we all live together with varying degrees of memory loss and with persons with varying degrees of memory loss. It has to do with the character of our community. I'm pleased to introduce and welcome Stephanie Chamberlain, one of the leaders of the Timber Ridge Creative Memory Health Team, who will be introducing today's speaker. Stephanie.
Thank you, Tom. So, welcome everybody. It's great to see a full room. There are lots of chairs over here on the left, my left, your right. So, Tom said a lot of nice things already about what we're here for and what we're doing. But I want to tell you the start. In September, Bobby Evans and Denise Jarvis and I went to the community center to hear some speakers, one of which was this jewel of Issaquah, Allyson. She is dynamite, I'll tell you. She's been so helpful to us. She came and met with Don Swartz and Ed Hansen and myself when we were brainstorming what to do, how are we going to do this Creative Memory Health Team, long name, and pursue it. And she's come and she's met with Tina and her support group one time. And she has a class that she teaches for the state of Washington to train professionals on how to work with people with dementia. And some of us got to go sit in on that class, and it was very informative. And we pass that information on. So I'm really glad we found her and welcome her to here. So what she's going to help us with, there's several things, I could go, probably list a dozen things. But one is there's still a stigma of some sort that people feel either because they don't think they act right, or their spouse doesn't think they act right, or we think, I don't want to sit with that person for some reason because they don't think like I think or do like I do. We want to get over that and accept people for who they are and what they can do and appreciate their abilities. The other thing is she's going to help us understand why a person with serious dementia thinks the way they do, acts the way they do, and that will help us understand why some of that reaction to what we say or how we approach them does. That's probably poor English. Excuse that. So we just want to be more accepting and more supportive as a community, just like Tom said. I think Allyson will educate us very well and help us understand that and how to do it. So with that, my jewel, it's yours.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for the introduction. So yeah, I'm here to talk about how to be a friend to someone with dementia. So a little bit about my background. Yeah, so Stephanie told you that I have a job. My job is that I teach care partners, professional care partners who work in memory care communities. I have another job. 3 days a week I'm at the University of Washington, where I'm with the Memory and Brain Wellness Center, where I am managing a project to use virtual learning to help primary care providers throughout the state of Washington become better equipped to diagnose and support people living with memory loss and dementia. So I am thrilled to be there because my cohort are the people who are the shakers and movers and making policy and making discoveries around dementia. So it's a really exciting place to be. So I'm all dementia all the time, but how did I get there? And that is because my, you've probably read my bio, but just really briefly, my parents divorced when I was in my 20s. They each went on to marry somebody who wound up getting dementia in their late 70s or 80s. My stepmom had something called Alzheimer's disease. My stepdad had something called vascular dementia. And then my closer connection is in my own family. My husband was one of those rare 5% or less of people who get dementia younger than the age of 65. He was 47 when we got his diagnosis, and he had something called frontotemporal dementia. Our kids were 12 and 15 at the time, so it was a tough few years there, raising 3 people. So anyway, Dr. Richard Taylor is one of my heroes. We'll be hearing from several of my heroes today. He is a fellow who had Alzheimer's disease. He died in 2015 of cancer. However, one of the things that he did is he created a group called Dementia Alliance International. And the only way that you can be a member of this group is if you have dementia. It's a way for people with dementia to come together. There's this saying, there's no about us without us. It's for people with dementia to come together and work on policy and work on getting the word out that people with dementia are still viable and still getting a lot of stuff done. Anyway, so he says, after I was diagnosed, my friends stopped coming around to see me. Finally, I called one of them and said, hey, why don't you come see me anymore? And he said, well, Richard, I just don't know what to say. And I said, how about hello? This really speaks to me because in my own experience and in the experience of my parents who were supporting their partners with dementia, what we found is that there were people who we thought would be there and they weren't. At the same time, though, there were outliers who I never thought would be there, who became some of our primary supports. And so I started really asking myself this question, why is that? Why are there some people who are really hesitant to come around? And that is what led me to prepare this talk. So I want to make sure first that we are all on the same page with the answer to the question, what is dementia? So it turns out that there actually is no diagnosis that's called dementia. Instead, there are over 100 different diseases that qualify as a dementia. The ones that you hear about the most are the ones that I have listed on this page. Of those 100, some of them are variations on a theme. There are actually different flavors of Alzheimer's disease, for instance, and those each count as one of the 100. In order for something to qualify as a dementia, and by the way, the thing that unites them is that dementia describes a set of symptoms, and these diseases all have those symptoms. And I'm going to describe what those 4 things are, 4 things that they have in common. One is that for something to qualify as a dementia, it must impact 2 parts of the brain. And those 2 parts of the brain translate to skills. So if I were riding my bicycle and I flew over the handlebars and smashed a tree, and I hurt just this part of my brain, even though I might act a lot like somebody with dementia, I don't actually have dementia because it's just one part of my brain. The reality is that once I have compromised my brain in that way, I am now more susceptible to getting a dementia. My brain is more vulnerable. But anyway, 2 parts of the brain. The second is that dementias are chronic. You don't have them some days, and then other days you don't. Although you might behave differently each day and have skills one day that you don't seem to have the next. Oh, come on, she can wash her own clothes. I've seen her wash her clothes. Don't help her with that. She did it yesterday. That's because yesterday she could, but today she can't. My stepdad, Ken, had a routine. His routine is that every morning he would get up and go outside and grab the newspaper. He would come inside and go to the kitchen where he would put on the coffee, and then he would sit in front of the television where he would turn on the TV, put his feet up on his red leather ottoman, and he would read the newspaper while listening to the news. It is so important for people living with dementia to hang on to their routines. More on that. Anyway, one day I got a call from my mom, and she said, well, for crying out loud, today Ken got up, he made the coffee, and instead of pouring the water into the coffee maker, he poured the half and half right into the coffee maker. So I guess that's something that I have to take away from him. And I said, well, Mom, dementia is chronic, but it doesn't mean that he'll have the same problems every day. So let's give him a second chance. Let's just let him try to hang on to his routine and make the coffee again tomorrow. And we'll revisit Ken in a few minutes. 2 parts of the brain, chronic, it is progressive. We don't have any pills that we can take to slow down the progression of dementia. There are medications that people with some dementias take that sharpen up their processing, which makes it seem like the progress is slowing down, but they will still decline at the same rate. It's just that they will seem sharper. And what we know about progression with dementia is that doctors in a research setting now define a difference between Alzheimer's disease and Alzheimer's disease with dementia. Because the stuff that's going on in my brain that will ultimately lead to dementia is going on for about 20 years before I actually become symptomatic, if I become symptomatic. Some people never become symptomatic. And so what doctors are working on, what researchers are really working on more than a cure, is how do we extend that period of progression from, say, 20 years to, say, 30 years or 40 years, so that if I would have become symptomatic at 84, I die of other causes when I'm 92, and I never became symptomatic. 2 parts of the brain, chronic, progressive, and at this point, fatal. The thing that all of these diseases have in common that you see on here, or that 3 of these have in common, Alzheimer's disease, Lewy body disease, and frontotemporal dementia, is that they are caused basically by proteins misbehaving in the brain that are causing brain tissue to die. The proteins are different in each of those 3 diseases, however. Vascular dementia is different. That one is caused by an unhealthy cardiovascular system that is causing small strokes, that is taking out parts of the brain, that causes the end result being the same, that the brain tissue starts to die. There is a dementia, one of those hundreds of diseases. There's one that was discovered just last year, so I tossed in a slide about it. Limbic predominant age-related TDP-43 encephalopathy, or LATE. And LATE acts a lot like Alzheimer's disease, and what we now know is that for many people who did not get diagnosed until their early 80s, they are more likely to have LATE than Alzheimer's disease. Why does this matter? The reason it matters is because if I'm doing research on an Alzheimer's drug, and I have all of these people coming in who have Alzheimer's disease, and I'm giving them this drug, and I say, well, phooey, it doesn't seem like it's working very well. Well, if I'm testing it on people who don't actually have Alzheimer's disease, of course it's not working well. So it really is important in a clinical setting that we know which disease somebody has. So this announcement has actually caused a reopening of certain drug trials so that they can make sure that they're testing them on the right people. So what happens with dementia is that the brain actually shrinks. The brain of somebody who has died from a dementia will be about a third less the size that it would have been if they had died of other causes. So pathways disappear. So it's not just that brain tissue is dying, it's that the pathways between tissues are dying. So I talked about this idea that there are two parts of the brain that are impacted if one has a dementia. I look at this and I know instantly that this is a person who died from Alzheimer's disease, because the two parts of the brain that are impacted by Alzheimer's disease are the left temporal lobe, which has to do with language. So we can see over here, there's the healthy left temporal lobe. Whoa, look at the gaping hole over there. This starts off with simply forgetting words or asking for the sugar instead of the salt. So who here has ever done that? Right? It doesn't mean that you have Alzheimer's disease. What happens is, in our brains, you guys, we start losing processing speed. From the time we turn 25, we lose 0.5 to 1% of our processing speed per year. And that is why we wind up with the, hey honey, while you're going to the kitchen, just grab me some of the, crap. You know, oh my God, the crispy things, the potato chips, right? Because I know what I want to say, but my brain is going like, wow, where is that? It takes time to get there. That processing speed is also what causes me, right now, I look like I'm just standing here talking, but my brain is going 1,000,000 miles an hour, keeping me upright. Every single little shift, my brain is saying shift left, shift right, move this way, move that way. So you can imagine that as my processing speed slows down and I trip across a cable, my healthy brain is able to say, throw the right foot forward, fast. But as my processing speed slows down, I'm on the ground and my brain is still going, wait a minute, which foot did I want to move? Processing speed for people living with dementia is compromised enormously. It can take somebody living with dementia up to 20 seconds to answer a simple question. Because what happens is the brain needs to go, say, from here to here to understand the question, but the bridge is out. So the brain goes here and here, the information goes here and here and here, and finally it gets to where it needs to go. It comes up with an answer, it needs to come out my mouth, and it wants to go from here to here, but it goes from here to here to here to here to here, and then the answer comes out my mouth. To be friendly and supportive of people living with dementia, we slow down a bit in the way that we talk. We don't raise our voices or do little baby sounds. Oh, come on, oh, look at you, eating all of your cereal, that's awesome. No. And we don't talk louder. We give people time. So that language piece, the way that evolves, is it may start off with me misusing words, but then what happens is I start to slur a little bit. I start using the wrong word more and more. I eventually start to kind of garble my words. It becomes this word salad. My cadence remains intact because we have language that starts to fall apart, but our rhythm seems to stay intact throughout the course of the dementia, which is why it's really helpful if I'm walking with somebody who has dementia, if I sing a little song, the ants go marching one by one, hurrah, hurrah. It really helps people keep their rhythm when they're walking. So with that language piece, I might ask you if it's time for us to go now, and the way that I'm going to pay that is it's time to go bow, and you're saying, what? It's time to go bow. In my brain, I'm hearing the right words, it's just that I've lost the ability to formulate them. That is what happens with Alzheimer's disease. In something like a frontotemporal dementia, people stop talking as they do in Alzheimer's disease, but with a frontal lobe dementia, it's not because they can't make any words anymore, they just lose the motivation to talk. It's fascinating. So Alzheimer's disease, there's that language piece. The other part is the hippocampi, which are up here in about 1.5 inches. That is the seat of memory and wayfinding. And so we know that for people living with dementia, there is With Alzheimer's disease, we have those friends who can no longer find their way places. Maybe they get in the honey, I don't know where I was going. I got in the car to come home from church in Kirkland, and I wound up in Burien, and we live in Bellevue. What happened? It's because I don't know how to get from point A to point B. In a memory care community, these are the folks who we find who are saying, honey, where do I live? Where's my place? And then the memory piece is a huge one. People living with Alzheimer's disease start off losing short-term memory, and then eventually they start losing more memories. And you can imagine what's happening here. Here's this great big healthy hippocampus. Look at what's happened to this person's hippocampus. So when my mom comes in and she says, sweetie, what time are we going to be going to that show? And I say, well, we're going to leave at 7, Mom. Okay, because it's such a good one. And I'm really thinking I'm going to like this one. I'm wondering though, when are we going? We're going at 7. Okay, and then she asks me 3 more times in the space of 4 minutes. And we have to understand what's happening here is that information we're leaving at 7 is going here to get laid down, but there's no there. It's like trying to put a book on a shelf and there is no shelf there. And so that means we need to be enormously patient with people who are asking the same question over and over again. I hear this a lot for people who are working with people living with dementia, especially with memory loss. What time are we going to go to the movies? Don't you remember? Well, duh. If I remembered, I wouldn't be asking you. So we have this capacity, if we are living with dementia, to start feeling like we are less than. To maybe not want to spend time with our friends so much, because our friends make us feel stupid. How do they make us feel stupid? By continually reminding us that we have forgotten something. I already told you that. Don't you remember? You know, you forget about every 5 things I tell you. Makes me feel terrible about myself. It also puts me in a position where I need to make a decision. You're saying I just told you that. I have no memory of just having told you that. So now I need to make a choice. And that choice is, am I forgetting, meaning that there's something wrong with my brain, or are you lying? And so we have the capacity to alienate ourselves from people living with dementia. And this is what happened to me when I was visiting my dad and my stepmom, is that I had to make care plans for my dad, and I would describe those to my stepmom, and she would forget, and I didn't know then what I know now. So I would say, Carol, I just told you. And I eventually got kicked out of the house. So that's Alzheimer's disease. So how big a problem is this anyway? It's a big problem. In Washington State, so Alzheimer's is the 3rd age-adjusted cause of death in Washington State. It's also, published figures say that Washington State is the 3rd highest rate of Alzheimer's disease in the nation. What? So, yay, I have access to all of these doctors now, so I've been able to ask them this question, and they were like, yeah, I don't believe that stuff. They say, you know what it is that it depends on what's put on the death certificate. And there are some states, like North and South Dakota, that have become they've made a huge effort to make sure that a death certificate reflected that somebody died from Alzheimer's disease instead of from, say, pneumonia, which is what a lot of people with dementia wind up with because they lose the ability to swallow. So in North and South Dakota, they made a huge effort. Let's have that death certificate be accurate. They are the number 1 and number 2 states for dementia in the United States. And it's because of record keeping. So which is the highest state? I would guess that they're all probably pretty equivalent. So Washington State, 107,000 people. This is 2016 numbers, climbing to 270,000 by 2040. So why, you guys, I think probably know the answer to this. Why are there going to be so many more people in the future with Alzheimer's disease and other dementias? Yeah, We're living longer, we're getting older. There are way more people who are 65 this year than there were last year. And there will be way more people who are 65 next year than there were this year. So we have this ballooning population that's all going to turn 75, 80, 90 at once. And so therefore, that's when if their dementia kicks in later in life, it makes sense. 324,000 unpaid family caregivers for people living in Washington State. It's a lot of work taking care of people living with dementia. There are two statistics that aren't on here, which I'm going to share with you. One is that for people living in Washington State who have mid-stage dementia, 24% of those people live alone. 17% of people in Washington State with late-stage dementia live alone. That is the other reason that I do this talk. And it's because of something that I call dementia in the wild. And it's the idea that, I want to be a better partner to my husband, my wife, my mom, whomever it may be. I also want to be a better neighbor. Because we are going to run into people all over the place who are displaying dementia symptoms, and we need to know about it. The state of Washington is almost certainly going to be putting into effect a plan to try to educate the masses about how to recognize people living with dementia. And whether that is through classes that are taught to everybody who works at Costco, or everybody, I just put together a proposal to teach everybody at the King County Library System, to teach librarians how do you recognize dementia. Because otherwise, we can behave inappropriately. So me and my husband, he's walking his cart down through the aisles at Costco. He's a little slack-jawed at this point, but by God, he's out there, he's doing it, he's out there shopping, and he's got dementia. There's a man walking by and he stares at him, and the guy says, "What's your problem, idiot?" Wow, I walked up to him and I said, his problem is that he has dementia. Or me, 20 years ago, getting into my car, and there is a lady walking down the street at 7 o'clock in the morning in November with a bathrobe and no shoes on. Just kind of walking down the street. And she says, Miss, yeah, I have no shoes. And I said, what I should have said is, oh my goodness. What I should have thought is, something's not right here. And I'm the only one who knows about it. I need to do something. I should have brought her inside. I should have asked her where she lived. If she wasn't able to tell me, I should have called the police. What I did do is I celebrated the fact that we wore the same size shoes, and I gave her a pair of sneakers and sent her on her way. Right? Dementia in the wild is my husband going to buy a latte, a bone-dry cappuccino, rather, and he says to the man at the counter, I would like a bone-dry cappuccino with a very flat affect. I would like a bone-dry cappuccino. And the guy behind the counter gives him a cappuccino that wasn't quite right. You and I, with our healthy brains, would say, probably would say is, I hate to complain, we just drink it. But what we might say is, this is actually a little wet. I wanted like more foam. Could you fix that for me? But what my husband said is, I wanted a bone dry, completely acting inappropriately for a person his age. That's dementia. Dementia is the man at Office Depot who goes up to the lady standing there, and he goes up to her and he starts touching her here. Can I approach you? Goes completely, no sense of appropriate space boundaries. Just goes right up to her and starts going, click, 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 click. And she looked down and she held up her cross and she said, Christian? And he said, and he walked away. This is dementia in the wild, folks. So, this group called Dementia Friends is an organization that was started in Japan and moved on to the UK, where they flourished. Dementia Friends is basically a curriculum, and I was a participant in a study in the state of Washington through the University of Washington, where I was a Dementia Friends champion. So I taught this curriculum to groups of people. They were required to do a survey beforehand and afterwards, and then again several months down the road. The effort was to figure out whether or not they were retaining information. They have 5 key messages that are worth noting. First, that dementia is not a normal part of aging. So the greatest predictor of whether you're going to get dementia next year is your age. We already know that. 10% chance by the time you're 65. By the time that you're in your mid-80s, it's more like 80, 82. I mean, sorry, I scared you inappropriately. 42%. Yeah, sorry. Drinks are on me. No. So it's not a normal part of aging. You're like, bummer, yeah, there's a 40% chance that you're going to get dementia, but there's a 60% chance that you're not. Dementia is caused by diseases of the brain. It is not willful people. It is not people just trying to make your life miserable or trying to make things hard on you. It's not just about memory problems. Alzheimer's disease, hippocampus, memory problems. My husband had frontotemporal dementia. That's the frontal lobe and the temporal lobes. Frontal lobe, highest seat of humanity. If this is a brain, here's my brain stem. The brain evolves like this, both in the womb and evolutionarily, so that the last part of the brain to evolve is this front part. It is where we have impulse control. It's where we have the ability to see things from another person's perspective. That's the part of the brain that is hit by people who have a frontal lobe dementia. My husband, well into his dementia, when we were driving along, would still point the right way for me to turn the car. And when he was dying, people who he hadn't seen in 10 years showed up, and he still remembered who they are. It is possible to have a good quality of life with dementia, absolutely, and that's part of the reason that I'm here today, a huge part of the reason, is for people to recognize that life goes on. We're going to talk about what are the things we do to have that good quality of life. And there is far more to the person than their dementia, far more. So what would happen if we assumed that everybody in our life is actually doing the best they can? This became my mantra when I was working with my husband, constantly reminding myself, he is doing the best that he can, and he loves me, and he would never willfully try to make my life difficult. And if he could, he would say, I'm sorry. So a little bit about normal aging versus Alzheimer's disease. So, memory loss that disrupts daily life. So here's what it looks like. I'm getting ready to leave the house. I've got my normal big fat healthy brain. So I'm leaving the house, I walk downstairs, I go through the living room, and there is my dog sitting on the sofa. And I say, oh my gosh, I forgot to feed you. I head to the kitchen, and as I'm on my way to the kitchen, my cell phone rings. Now, I can keep, does anybody know how many things I can keep in working memory if I have a healthy brain? Yeah, exactly. It's around 7 things that I can keep in my brain. So what's in my brain right now is feed the dog. Hey, Allyson. Oh, hey, what's up? Mommy wants to know if you're going to come this weekend. To the thing at her house? Yeah, I'm going to come. Okay, so she was hoping that you would be able to bring that fruit salad thing you made. Oh, okay, I don't know if I'm going to be able to find watermelon this time of year. Well, anyway, she's hoping that you'll bring it. And you know what? You need to bring those spoons back. Which spoons? You borrowed some, those weren't your spoons, those were my spoons. Okay, by the time I hang up the phone, where is feed the dog? Gone. So what do I do now? I'm standing in my kitchen. Well, why am I here, right? How many of you have had this experience? You open the refrigerator door, and you look and you're like, wow, why am I here? Okay, right. We don't have dementia. We have distraction. Right? When I'm distracted, I don't remember things. I just got way distracted. So what do? How do I figure it out? Exactly. I retrace my steps. I turn around, and I'm like, okay, all right, where was it? Okay, I was upstairs. All right, so I was upstairs, and then I walked, oh my God, there he is. I'm so sorry, let me feed you. Versus the person who is living with memory loss, the same scenario happens. Have the phone call with my sister. I hang up the phone, and I notice that there are dishes in the sink. So I start washing the dishes. And I see the coffee maker. So I go over and I make a cup of coffee. And there's the TV. So I sit down and I start watching TV. Maybe later in the day I see the dog and I say, oh, I should feed you. And maybe it's the first time, maybe it's the 11th time I've fed the dog that day. Who knows? So the big difference is that when I have dementia, I don't necessarily, in fact, I don't remember that I'm not remembering. With my healthy brain, I know I have forgotten something. So what do you think that feels like in your body when somebody says to you, I told you this 3 times already? What is it? What are the emotions that you think that brings up? Anger, loss of control. There are 2 mental health issues that most people with dementia have in addition to their dementia. What do you think they are? Low self-esteem. Low self-esteem for sure. Guilt. Yeah, guilt about what did I do to bring this on? I mean, it could be. But mental health issues that people might take medication for.
Depression.
Depression and anxiety. Depression and anxiety. Why do people living with dementia have depression? Because it's really depressing. Right? I have this loss of intrinsic as well as extrinsic skills. I can no longer say things the way I used to say things. I can't process things the way I used to process things. I can't put on my own shoes, for crying out loud. Extrinsic skills. They've taken away the car. They don't let me be alone with the grandkids anymore. That's depressing. And then anxiety. My husband said to one of the people who helped me care for him, I am so tired of chasing my thoughts. The inability to complete a thought, and especially for people who live very structured lives. Who is a list maker out there? Right? I live and die by my list. I die if I lose it. I live if I have it. And so I need to know where I'm supposed to be at all times. I check my calendar 30 times a day. So what happens now when I'm in a position where I don't know, where am I supposed to be now? What am I supposed to be doing now? Can you imagine what that feels like inside your body? To not know? To be so out of control? So how do we help people who are in that state? Oh, calm down. Just calm down. It's not that big a deal. I'm going to tell you where you need to be. Oh my gosh. Wow. We are constantly, for people who are supporting people living with dementia, constantly soothing. We're not reminding. We're not saying you forgot. We're not saying don't you remember. We're saying it's called reflection and validation. Reflecting meaning, wow, you are really upset because you're not sure about where we're supposed to be right now. That's got to be so hard. I am so sorry. That's got to be so hard. Hey, you know what? Why don't we make a list? Let's write a list, and then you can have the list, and that will help you remember where you need to be. Challenges in planning or solving problems, people lose the ability to process a series of steps. I was in a care community where there was a table, 4 ladies sitting at the table. 3 of the ladies were eating their meals. One of the ladies was just sitting there looking at her plate. I wasn't there to work with people. I was there for another project, but I had some time to kill. So I walked up to her and I sat down. I pulled up a chair and I said, hi, I'm Allyson. Breakfast looks pretty good today. And she said, it does it? And I said, it does. It looks good. And I said, are you going to eat your breakfast? And she said, should I? And I said, you should eat your breakfast. And she said, okay. And then she just sat there, and I said, pick up your fork. So she picked up her fork. And I said, poke it into the scrambled eggs. So she did. Put it in your mouth. So she did. I had to coach her through every step of something as simple as eating a meal. So you can imagine what it's like brushing your teeth. For crying out loud, just get upstairs and brush your teeth. What is the first step in brushing one's teeth? Take the cap off, put water on the toothbrush, right? How about find the bathroom? Right? So for people living with dementia, we break things into little tiny steps. Why? So they can be successful. I want to feel good about myself. And I want you to feel good about yourself. So I am going to break things into manageable steps. Instead of saying, hey babe, would you please wash the carrots? I say, hey, would you open the refrigerator and take the carrots out? Thank you. Would you run water over the carrots? Would you scrub the carrots with your hand while you're rubbing water over them? We break things into manageable pieces. Watching my husband make a ham and cheese sandwich goes to the refrigerator, takes out the ham, takes out the cheese, puts it on the counter, grabs the bread, puts it on the counter, grabs the mustard, gets a knife, puts the knife on the counter, and then starts banging on the counter and swearing because he cannot figure out the first step in the sequence. And of course, this creates difficulties completing familiar tasks at home. I mean, we all have problems with these things with our healthy brains. It just is a whole lot worse when we have dementia. There may be a recipe that I have read a million times, and now sometimes I need to pull the recipe out and read it because I can't remember the steps. Confusion with time or place. So for people who are living, especially with Alzheimer's disease, it's not like there are these care communities that are like Chagrin Falls, 1952, and I think, wow, that's gotta be so confusing to live in a place that is made to look like Chagrin Falls in 1952, when the girls who are caring for me have pierced eyebrows and green hair. Like, wow, I don't remember them being in Chagrin Falls in 1952. It's not like people go back and they live in another part of time. They may have moments, right? I'm talking to you and you have Alzheimer's disease, and then all of a sudden you look at me and you say, so I think that we should probably put all of the cans of tomato sauce on the third shelf. And then maybe we're going to need to put, and I'm like, wow, he's back in high school when he was working in a grocery store. But he's not going to stay there. He comes back out of it. People live in these weird, sort of layered place in time. In Bellevue, Washington, there is a couple who lives in a condominium. And the man has Alzheimer's disease. In that condominium in Bellevue, there is a kitchen, and in the kitchen there is a door. And if you open the door, you wind up in the pantry. This gentleman grew up in a farmhouse in Idaho. Looked nothing like the condo in Bellevue. They had a kitchen, looked nothing like the kitchen in Bellevue. There was a door in that kitchen in Idaho, and if you open up the door, you wind up in the bathroom. His wife can't figure out why he's peeing in the pantry. Because he's in a kitchen, and there's a door. And where I am today in my memory is that a door in a kitchen leads to a bathroom. We're going to come back to him. People have trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. There are huge vision changes that happen when somebody is living with dementia. Huge. These are some of the most profound changes. Vision and hearing are both impacted. The auditory piece I just want to touch on briefly, and that is that, imagine, this kind of makes sense. My processing speed is really slowing down. My ears still work. When I hear a sound coming from over here, I have to start thinking about what's making that sound. And it takes me a little time to figure that out. But there's also a sound over here. And there's a sound over there. Think about a typical dining room, communal dining room. There are dishes clanking, there might be music playing, there are conversations at a bunch of different tables. There are people conversing at my table. There's somebody wheeling a cart across the room. For somebody living with dementia, this can be incredibly agitating because it's a cacophony. I can't figure out where all the sounds are coming from, and to try to process them is just way too much. So it's not unusual if you travel with somebody who's living with dementia to a place where there's a lot of different sounds. It is overwhelming. My husband and I eventually stopped going to Trader Joe's. And we stopped going to Costco because it was too much stimulation. The visual piece, one of the things that people have issues with is colors. It's hard to tell colors that are on top of other colors. It becomes one big thing. So in my house, my upstairs bathroom has a white tile floor, white toilet, white walls. My husband would go in, shut the door, and pee on the wall. Because it's all white. There are care communities where they have replaced all of the toilet seats with colored toilet seats or wooden toilet seats to help people find the toilet. So if I'm going to help my husband by putting clothes out on the bed, for instance. I don't necessarily want to put his camel hair sweater and his khaki pants on the beige bedspread and say, go get dressed. Because he'll come down and say, you didn't put the clothes out, because it all looks the same. Another aspect of this visual thing is, Stephanie, would you come up and help me for a moment? So, I know you can't really do this without smacking your neighbors, but I just want to, we'll have Stephanie just take a seat for a moment. If I have my hands, if I want to do a test of my peripheral vision, so I would hold my hands out and I wiggle my fingers, and for me, I always cheat like this. For me, it's probably about like here, right? It's not unusual for somebody in their 70s to be more like this or so. And it doesn't mean that I'm blind, like that I can't see things that are over here. It means that the area that I'm able to focus on is the things that are between my hands, right? For somebody who's 20, it's like here. They're like a horse, right? Or a bunny rabbit. So for people who are living with early stage dementia, and by early stage, I mean they probably don't even have a diagnosis. It's probably that their spouse might notice like something's different. For early stage dementia, it is like I am wearing a scuba mask. And that translates then to a field of vision that's about like this. And so what does that mean? It means that yes, I can see things over here, but my focus is on this area. This is what I am paying attention to because that is all my brain can handle. So go ahead for a moment, just go ahead and put on a scuba mask like I've got one on, right? And then turn and look at the person next to you. Right? Do you feel a little bit limited by what you can see? Okay. By mid-stage dementia, it is like binoculars. So if we put binoculars on, it means that my field of vision is about the width of my shoulders. So if we put binoculars on, and you turn and face the person next to you, Stephanie and I are going to do this. If Stephanie is the one with the binoculars on, I'm going to try to shake her hand. Yes. Try this with the person that you're next to. One of you put your binoculars on, and take turns, one of you being the one who's trying to shake hands. Can't see that hand. Yeah. And to make matters worse, by the time somebody has late-stage dementia, the brain is done with trying to take images in, flip them upside down, do the whole depth perception thing. So people lose depth perception, and it's like they have monocular vision. So people will say to me, I don't know what his problem is. Look at him. You see him? He walks at a normal pace. But put him next to me, and we're walking together, and he always walks behind me. I don't know what the problem is. What's the problem? He can't see her. For people living with dementia, the partner becomes the safety. I want to know where that person is at all times. And so therefore, to be a friend to that person, I slow down. I hook arms with them. We hold hands. And if they start going very, very slowly, I go very, very slowly. So what I wanted to demonstrate with Stephanie is that if Stephanie has this binocular or monocular vision, I need to be really careful about the way that I approach her. For one thing, I want to recognize that there is this line, which I'll draw here. Stephanie, if you hold your hand out for a second. It's about the distance of a handshake. It is the difference between, and you can drop your hand, is the difference between public space and personal space. And so I do not want to come into Stephanie's public personal space without an invitation, and I certainly don't want to come into her intimate space. I never touch somebody with dementia without asking first because I might startle them. So what I do is, I'm going to turn, Stephanie, let's just turn you a little more this way. What I'm going to do is I stop about this far out and I hold up my hand because my hand's near my face now. There's a connection. This hand belongs to this face. And I say, hey, Stephanie, and then I say, Allyson. And then when I bring my hand in for a handshake, I come this way. Hey. So that she sees my hand coming. When I'm in a care community with people living with dementia, I approach everybody this way. It's called the positive physical approach. Hey, Stephanie, Allison, hey. And now, right now, I am in what would be considered potentially a confrontational place. I'm right in front of her. So when I come in to greet her, I come into the side. How's it going?
She actually turned my hand. I don't know if you can see that.
This is something, one of my heroes is a woman by the name of Teepa Snow, Teepa, Snow. Some of you know her. And this is her work. That when I come in with this positive physical approach, I do this thing, it's called a hand under hand hold, where I hold her hand like this. And then I come in. And the reason that I do that is because as dementia progresses, I use this as a tool so that if, for instance, this is a spoon, the way that we tend to feed, I'm going to let go for a second, the way we tend to help people with dementia eat is that we poke food in their mouth. My husband started choking. So instead I did a hand under hand method, which is that I would sit next to him with this grip, and then I would hold the spoon. So that these are my skill fingers, these are my strength fingers, and then together. Together, we zip up his shirt. My husband came to me one day, he was so agitated. He said, my buttons have stopped working. And so the way that we fix that is hand under hand. Together, we button his shirt so that he retains a sense of control. He retains a sense of being involved in his own care. We use this to brush hair. We use this to wash the body with a washcloth so that I am a participant, but so is my husband, which is also why I don't use the word caregiver. I use the word care partner, because give implies that somebody else is taking. We are partners. We're in this together, my friend. Thank you, Stephanie. Let's give her. And we can direct people to websites. If there are places, if somebody would like to go online and watch these techniques, it's out there. New problems with words and speaking, we've talked about that, and of course people lose the ability to write words as well and do mathematics. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. Is there anybody here who's still looking for the Christmas presents that they hid 3 years ago? Yeah, we all have this problem. For somebody living with dementia, it's a whole lot worse. Decreased or poor judgment? Absolutely. Before my husband even had a diagnosis, we were at my friend's birthday party for her 14-year-old daughter, and my husband approached a 14-year-old girl right in her intimate space, moved right in and said, "You're very pretty, may I take your picture?" Oh my God, what are you doing? Or there was a card game he would play. It's called Magic the Gathering. Anyway, you buy these cards, you see, and you build these decks, and then you play games against other people, and it's really cool to have a really, really cool deck. He was spending $400 a week on cards, and had been for months before I figured it out. People can start making terrible choices. So to be a friend to somebody who's living with dementia, and a partner to somebody living with dementia, we need to kind of stay on top of some things and make sure that we are paying attention to what's happening and helping people make the right choices and setting them up to make right choices. Withdrawal from work or social activities, I mean all of us, as we get a little older, I know for me, I'm like, I just can't go out every night anymore. I just can't do that anymore. So I'm starting to say no to some things. But for somebody who's living with dementia, there is a real tendency to start isolating. And that's a bad thing. Isolating is a bad thing. But why do people isolate? Because I'm not as good as you anymore. I know it. I know that I can't do the things that I used to do. I have anxiety about it. There was a lady at a care community where I was delivering, not a care community, sorry, a lady in a community that raised her hand, and she said, my husband is has Alzheimer's disease now, and He sometimes says things that are inappropriate, and he does sometimes get a little loud. He will touch other people's food. And by the way, just a thought on that. Here I am sitting at my table with my binocular vision. If I look down at my plate, you guys could try this. If you put your binoculars on and you look down, I don't see my plate. My plate's here next to my stomach. What I see is the middle of the table and your plate. So I'm just going to go eat that food, because that's the food that I see. Anyway, this lady raised her hand and she said, so he has these behaviors, and I know that it's challenging for people to be with him. So what we've done, and I just want you to tell me if this is okay, that what we're doing now is we just take all our meals in our room. And I said, you are not, no, that is not the thing that you need to do. What you need to do is educate your community and have them understand how isolating it is to be the partner of a person living with dementia and have everybody go away and treat you like it's your fault, to treat you like you're a pariah and like you did something wrong and that this is your punishment. No, what we need as partners of people living with dementia and as people living with dementia is to be included. We need patience. We need people who say, you know, there but for the grace of God go I, right? The least I can do is be helpful to people. Like for 45 minutes, I can sit with somebody who maybe says a few inappropriate things. I encourage you. So yeah, and then changes in mood and personality. This is the big one. I really wish somebody had told me that personalities don't change. People change. I mean, we have shades of change, but we don't become a completely different person. My husband became a completely different person, and it took us 6 years to get a diagnosis. It's because especially you're a younger person, and the hallmark, what everybody's looking for, is memory loss. And if somebody doesn't have memory loss, it's very hard to get a dementia diagnosis. One of my heroes is Dr. Alan Power. And I want to bring up this concept that he talks about, which is called cognitive ramps. Because it has very much a lot to do with the idea of being friends and helping people who are living with dementia. So the way that he presents this, I attended a lecture of his last year. He presented at a conference called the Discovery Conference. It's an annual conference that happens in Seattle. It's put on by the Alzheimer's Association. This year it's actually going to be in Linwood, and it's on April 1st. If you're really interested in learning a lot more about dementia, it's a fabulous conference to go to. And Stephanie, the literature that I gave you, there were a couple of pamphlets for that one. But anyway, so he won't be there this year because he was there last year. So he did this lecture, and he said, well, guess what, everybody? Today, in addition to me, you get to have my fabulous colleague who's coming up on stage. He's a little late. He's flying in from South Africa. And we are so lucky to have him today. Oh, wait, there he is. And Dr. Power says, imagine then that the back of the auditorium opens up, and in comes a fellow in a wheelchair. And he rolls down the aisle, and he gets to the bottom of the stage, and he looks at me, and he looks at the stairs, and he looks at me. Do you think he'd be a little irritated? Yes. Do you think he might even say something about his irritation? Absolutely. Because I, who have this healthy body, should have thought to get a ramp in place for him. But I didn't. Cognitive ramps is the recognition that there are places where people who are living with dementia are going to have a hard time, and we want to preempt. So let's go back to Papa Ken for a moment. Beautiful Papa Ken, who gets up to make the coffee, and instead of putting water in the coffee machine, he puts the cream right into the coffee machine. We need to take that away from him now. No. Because he might not do it again, but we can also make sure he doesn't do it again by putting in place some cognitive ramps. So what are cognitive ramps I could put in place with him? What's that? I could hide the cream. I could put the cream behind something else. Yeah, I could definitely do that. Pitcher of water. I could put a pitcher of water right next to the coffee maker. I could put a little sign on the coffee machine that says water here. As his dementia progresses and he loses even the ability to follow those ramps, I could say, hey Ken, you know what? Sometimes I wake up and the coffee isn't ready yet, so what I was hoping is maybe we could set it up at night. Let's set it up at night. And then I could be there while he does it so I could coach him. Let's go back to that fellow who's peeing in the pantry. What are some cognitive ramps? What could his wife do to keep him from having that problem? Take the door off. I love that. Take off the door. Maybe paint it a different color. Maybe I could put a sign on the door. For people living with dementia, sometimes it's best to actually have signs on the floor because they tend to walk like this a lot. I could have a sign on the floor. Or what families will do is they will put tape, like blue tape, and they will mark a little trail with arrows that goes from place to place in the house. So when my husband comes into the kitchen, I say, follow the arrows, Bill, follow the arrows. Okay. I'm putting things in place to allow him to be successful. Communicating with compassion. So we talked about this already. The idea that I want to reflect and validate emotions. So my friend Diana went to California last spring. Her dad had passed away. He was living in a memory care community. They had one day clear his stuff out, or they were going to get charged for another month. So she called her brother up, and they flew together. He came from Maine, she came from Seattle. They met in California. They go upstairs to Dad's room. She's got giant garbage bags. And she says to Victor, so Vic, I'll take the drawers, and you take the closet. We need to just, everything's going to go to Goodwill. It's just going to go to Goodwill. Just stuff everything in the bags. And so she's over there pulling open the drawers like, whoo, 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 filling up the bag with clothes. And then she looks over at Victor, and Victor has got the first shirt. Shakes it. He puts it on the bed, does up the buttons. Folds it one way and then the other way. Folds it in thirds. And very gently, like it's a little fragile thing, puts it in the bag, and then goes back for the next shirt. Victor has horrible OCD and control issues. Things have to be done a certain way. So Diana goes up to him and she says, stop, oh my God, we're never going to get through this, you need to stop, you need to. He grabbed her arm and he said, don't you think I would stop if I could? This is the way I do things, and it's the way I have to do things. So for people who are living with dementia, when my friend Kevin's wife says, I'll put the dishes in the dishwasher, and he says, okay. And she goes over and she pulls open the dishwasher, and she pulls out the top rack, and she goes and she takes all the plates, she stacks them on top of each other, and puts the stack in, and then throws the door shut. Right? To go up to her and say, stop it, stop it, stop it, you're doing it wrong. Oh my God, you can't do it that way. Just makes her feel awful. Instead, thank you so much. I'm so glad that you did that, because now that's less work for me to do. And when somebody is in the throes of being upset by something, again, to go up to them and say, you need to calm down. Now calm down right now. You're overreacting. I'm reacting the way that is appropriate for somebody whose brain is in the state that my brain is, and we need to accept that. My husband and I were at my mom's house playing cribbage. Who plays cribbage? Well, more of you need a cribbage club. Okay, so we're playing cribbage, and for those of you who don't play, wooden board with holes in it, we play cards, and then we keep track of our scores by moving little pegs. So my husband gets 6 points. He moves his little peg, and he says, 1, 3, mix, third, 40. And I, who have a healthy brain and understand that my husband doesn't, say, oh my gosh, you're rocking it. I don't stand a chance. My mom, who doesn't get it, says, oh, honey, let me help you. Let me help you. So she takes the pin out and goes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did my husband at that point say, Kath, boy, am I a lucky fellow to have you on my side? No. He pushed away his chair and made rude gestures and started screaming at her. At that point, I say, "Oh my gosh, that's so irritating. She's moving your peg. I'd be mad too. Mom, cut it out." And I put his peg back where he had put it. I don't say, "Evan, calm down. You're getting out of control." I offer comfort and reassurance. I need to check my own emotional state before I get involved because it can be a little overwhelming sometimes. Take a big breath. Whatever it is that you need to do. Get out of the room. If you need to get out of the room, if my husband would be screaming, which he would do, he would play computer games, and he lost the ability to play the games that he loved. And he would scream, and I mean scream. So before I would go in that room, I would go to have a moment by myself. Sometimes there was wine involved. Okay. I'm here to help. Respecting another person's reality, it's not my job to correct you. Just like with the dishes, I don't correct you with that, but also when you're reality about something. So when you come downstairs and you're wearing 3 sweaters, I don't say. Now, it depends on the relationship too. It could be that our relationship is such that you actively want help from me, and that exists for some people living with dementia. It may well be that I say, "Mom, I think that you're going to be hot outside in those sweaters." It may be that Mom says, "Thank you," and takes a couple off. It also may be that my mom has some words for me and tells me that I can just go dress myself. She knows how to dress herself fine, thank you very much. I say, "Wow, okay." Or I can just say, "You look awesome today." When we get outside, if she's a little hot, she'll take off some of the sweaters. The validation technique is something developed by a woman named Naomi Feil, and F-E-I-L. And the idea with the validation technique is that I stay in your reality at all times, even though I might change the subject. So a scenario would be that my mom comes in, she's wearing her pearls, she's got on that pink pastel sweater that my dad gave her, and she comes in and she sits by the front door and she's got her purse, and I say, "Where are we going?" And she says, "Oh, your father's picking me up, he's taking me out to lunch." I don't say, "Daddy died in 1992. What I say is, "Are those the pearls he gave you? Oh my God, those are awesome. I love those on you. You know what I was hoping we could do? Let's go take a look at some of those wedding pictures. I just, you guys are beautiful. Come on." So I take her away from the moment while letting her stay in her reality. Avoiding open-ended questions. "What do you want for lunch?" "Well, do you want the ham sandwich or the turkey sandwich?" We start reducing choices for people. There's a video called Alive Inside. I don't know if any of you have had a chance to watch it, but it's about the power of music for people who are living with dementia. It's incredibly powerful for people to hear music. Not just any music, music that they love. Music that is significant causes people to regain a sense of themselves. There are dementia experts who say that everybody living with dementia should listen to music for 20 minutes twice a day. It is like happy juice in the brain. Anyway, there's a movie about it, and in it there's a gentleman who's sitting in a chair. He has dementia. His daughter comes in, and first of all, she doesn't come in she doesn't do the positive approach that we talked about. She comes in and she stands in a confrontational stance right in front of him, leans in and says, "Hey Daddy, who am I? Who am I? Which one am I?" Terrible. So anyway, and what he says is, "Well, just give me a minute. That is an open-ended question, rather than just saying, "Hey, it's me, Shelley." Giving people choices. Choices build autonomy. Autonomy being the ability to do things for myself. It is huge to give people the opportunity to do things for themselves as much as possible, and one of the ways that we do that is by creating opportunities for choice. So I take this to the extreme when my husband would be showering. "Did you want the lavender soap today or the avocado soap?" Oh, that's a good choice. Okay, let's do that one. "You know, I can't decide if we should use the green washcloth or the brown one. Which do you think would be the right washcloth?" "The brown one." "Okay, good, let's do it." All through the day, I look for opportunities to give him choices so that he is a participant in his life. Talk to me. When you're talking to somebody living with dementia, you use a normal tone of voice and you talk directly to them. They may not have any language skills left. And my point being that there's somebody that they're with who could answer those questions. Instead of me looking at that person and asking the questions, I ask the person living with dementia, knowing that this person may well answer. This was my husband's huge complaint very early on. He said, why does everybody always talk to you? And this was before he even lost any language skills. He was perfectly capable of answering questions, but people always talk to me, including his doctors. It was really, really irritating. Don't argue. What time is breakfast? I was in a care community where a lady came in and she sat down and she looked over at the staff. It was about 10:30 in the morning. She sat down and she said, excuse me, I'm ready for breakfast. To which they said, well, Jen, you already ate breakfast. To which she said, are you telling me you're telling me that I already ate breakfast? Like, you think that there's something wrong with my brain and that I wouldn't know if I've already had breakfast? I would know if I've already had breakfast. Escalated. Instead of just saying, wow, breakfast, what do you want? Or if it's an ongoing problem and every day she comes in again and again and again, then I might give her something small to eat. Hey, why don't you have this bowl of berries and then we'll go ahead and get something else. Or I would change the subject and say, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee and let's go talk about what you'd like for breakfast. Especially for somebody who has rapid cycling memory loss, if I can distract them, within a few minutes they'll forget that they wanted breakfast and I can keep them from overeating. Using nonverbal cues is very helpful. Drink, do you want to eat, patting a chair, let's sit down. The positive approach we already talked about. Right? Speaking slowly and clearly. Respecting, we said people can take up to 20 seconds to answer a question. And then the final thing I want to talk about today, before we open up for questions, is another piece of learning from Dr. Alan Power, which is called the Dementia Domains of Well-Being. So you guys are probably, many of you, familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I can't have safety unless my physiological needs are met, and on up the triangle. The idea is that as a person living with dementia, I cannot experience joy unless I have a sense of identity, connectedness, security, and so on. So Dr. Power presented this at the conference that I attended, and he said, and there are amazing things happening in Arkansas that are bearing out that this is actually really impactful. And so I emailed him and I said, what's going on in Arkansas? And he said, oh, you need to speak with Dr. Angela Norman. And he gave me her contact information. So I reached out to her and I said, what's going on in Arkansas? And she said, oh my gosh. Well, actually it was her assistant. Her assistant said, oh my gosh. So what Dr. Power says is that what we have to imagine is that for every person living with dementia, that there are 6 cups in front of them. And one is the cup that holds the identity, the connectedness, security, and so on. And what he maintains is that if any one of those cups are empty, that a person is going to be far more likely to get themselves in trouble by behaving in ways that are inappropriate. In a care setting, that means that we give them drugs to make them behave better. Or if they've really gotten off, we call 911. And they get trucked off to a psychiatric hospital. So Dr. Angela Norman said, so what I did is, I've got this community of 30 people who I'm supporting, and I've got 2 that are constantly, really getting themselves in trouble. So what we did is we pretended that they had the 6 cups in front of them, and we looked for where are the places that they are where their needs are not being met. And what we did is we said, well, we went through it, and we were like, well, a sense of identity. Okay, she's got that connectedness, autonomy. We do everything for her now. She's so slow. We just do everything for her. Let's fill that cup up. Let's start doing things with her instead of for her. Let her take as much time as she needs to get things done. And what we found is that for those 2 people, their behaviors improved enormously. So we said, what the heck? Let's just apply this to everybody in the community. It worked so well that we then tried it in another one of our communities. And the same results bore out. So we went to the state of Arkansas and we said, we're using this philosophy, and what we found is that in our communities, we have no more trips to the psychiatric hospital, and we've greatly reduced the amount of drugs that we're using to curb behaviors. The state of Arkansas said, well, hi, let's do it everywhere. And so they did. They adopted it as their state philosophy. The Center for Medicaid and Medicare at the Fed level keeps track on a statewide basis of how many people are being treated with antipsychotic medications in long-term care communities. Why do you think the Center for Medicaid and Medicare cares? They're paying for it. And so they rank these states based on the number of people that are using these expensive drugs. And the more drugs that you're using, the lower you are down on the list. Arkansas was number 47. They are now number 21. Washington State is number 29. So I really believe in this philosophy of looking preemptively at where might people's needs not being met so they are more likely to act out and get themselves in trouble. So identity. I want to help people retain a sense of who I was and who I am, focusing on what I have, not on what I have lost. Dr. Power says, thank God people don't judge me based on what I can no longer do and what medications I'm taking. But that's the way that we tend to look at people who are living with dementia. Instead, looking at what I can do, who am I? If you're a big gardener, let's go to your garden and work together, or better yet, let's go to my garden and work together. Let's go walk at the Arboretum. Let's go to the Botanical Garden. When you are less capable, let's go to Mulbach's. When you are less capable, I'm going to bring you flowers. I'm going to bring gardening books. I'm going to keep you involved in something that has always been important to you. There's a Boeing engineer who I was working with at a care community. We built model airplanes to keep that sense of who am I. Connectedness, so it's a connection to myself, but it's also connections to community. This is why I kept taking my husband to Costco, taking him to Trader Joe's, taking him to, I don't even know how I did it. I actually had somebody make a video of it, so I would remember someday, like, how was I able to get him into a car? He was in a wheelchair, I'd like fold him up, stick him in the car, and we'd walk around, I'd push him around Alki Point, or we'd go to the lake, Middle Washington, Green Lake, thank you. My brain works. Because I wanted him to have a sense of doing the things that we used to do as a group. Keep taking people to church. Keep taking them to whatever kind of organized activities you used to do. My husband took Taekwondo lessons way beyond the point when he could still understand what Taekwondo is. But he'd put on his white clothes, by God, and he'd go there, and he'd stand there, and he'd do a little bit of stretching. Our friend Don, he was one of the outliers. He's somebody who showed up. And every week, he came twice a week, and he picked up my husband and brought him to the gym. In the beginning, they would go to the gym and they'd work out together for half an hour. By the end, my husband would go to the gym, he'd walk in, he'd get a drink of water, and he would sound ready to go. But we kept him going because that was a community that was important to him. It kept him connected. Momentia, there are some flyers over there. It's a website, Momentia, Seattle.org, right? You guys are about empowering. This is about empowering people living with dementia to remain in the community. It's a grassroots organization that has worked with a number of other organizations to say, hey, can you host events that are specifically for people living with dementia? So now, every 9:30 Monday morning, I can go to the memory loss walk at the zoo. Or I can go to the Alzheimer's Cafe if I'm in Port Orchard. Ballroom dance lessons. There are drumming circles. There are all different kinds of dance classes. Garden walks. There's a ton of stuff that you and the person living with dementia can go to together. Why do that? Because it keeps me active in the community. And for me as the partner, if we run into trouble, there are people who can support me. If my husband starts saying things that are wildly inappropriate, everybody there gets it. They don't judge him. This is the slide I threw in because I'm proud of it. I'm working with a group of incredibly talented people. That's our website, zinnia.app, and we are developing an app that is basically montages of photos to keep people connected. so that I can go and look at a photo stream of things that were once very meaningful to me. Security. So familiarity breeds a sense of security. Familiarity in things like keeping my routine. Things are the same as they have been. I do things the same way. That helps me feel secure. There are people who will say to me, you know, I don't even know why I visit her anymore. I'm telling you, she doesn't even know who I am. Well, people living with dementia may not know who you are, but they often still know that they know you. And that creates a sense of familiarity, which leads to a sense of security. So the scenario of a daughter who takes her mom to Nordstrom's, and they spend 2 hours at Nordstrom's. And then they get back, and the daughter, they go upstairs to mom's living in a care community. They go upstairs to the mom's room. She's tired. She needs a nap. And the daughter says to the mom, listen, Mom, I'm just going to run and use the restroom, and then I'll come to give you a kiss goodbye. So she comes to give Mom a kiss goodbye, and she says, so anyway, Nordstrom's again next week? And Mom says, well, I don't really like Nordstrom's. What are you talking about? You just loved it. Well, I don't think so. We were just at Nordstrom for 2 hours. No, I'm not. I don't think so. I'm not, no. And so then the daughter's like, why do I bother? Why do you bother? Because we all know that life is nothing but a string of moments. And the more of those moments that are happy, the happier that we are as an individual. And so therefore, yeah, right now she has no memory of those moments, but for 2 hours or whatever it was that you were there, she was in the moment, and every one of those moments was awesome. The other thing that's true is that there's a part of our brain that doesn't decline through dementia, the part of the brain called the amygdala. If you look at scans of brains of people who are going through decline from dementia, the amygdala stays intact. That is the seat of memory of emotions. And so therefore, I associate things and people with an emotional response. People recognize who the care partners are who are kind to them. They recognize who the people are who yell at them and tell them to shut up. They recognize who the people are who walk away. They have that emotional memory. So if we are hanging out with somebody living with dementia, of course we want to reduce clutter, because people can't necessarily see it, and they can't necessarily move as well. We live in the moment, we have a reconnection plan. I always made sure that my husband had his cell phone on, high volume, ringer turned on, high volume, so I could call him if I needed him, if I wanted to find him, if I lost him. Autonomy we talked about. Security comes from this feeling that I still have some control over my life. There are things that I still do because of all of these losses. And we said choices are a great way to do that. So we shift from doing for to doing with. I always have to consider your capacity to decide. Right, and there we go, I focus on what you can do. And we know that how someone responds to you is a lesson about your approach, like the example of my mom with cribbage. In Okinawa, they have a term called ikigai, which is a sense of meaning. It's a reason to get up every day. Everybody needs to have a reason to get up every day. And it really irritates me in care communities. Often it's, here, fold these towels. Now fold these towels. How about these? Trying to find things for people to do. Volunteerism. When my husband could no longer be a software engineer at Microsoft, he became the guy who feeds the fish at the Issaquah Fish Hatchery. And he did that until he came home one day and he said, I don't want to do it anymore. And I said, why? You love going there. And he said, because they treat me like I'm stupid. Yep. So anyway, looking for opportunities for people to stay engaged. Kevin let Terry load the dishwasher because it made her feel good about herself. Even though she did it wrong, she was the one who was keeping up the house. Robert Simpson died from Alzheimer's disease, but he and his wife wrote a book called Through the Wilderness of Alzheimer's. I still want to be needed in some way. I would like you to talk things over with me, even if I can't respond well. I still need to hear I need you, even when I can't believe that you do. Saying things to somebody who's living with dementia like, I don't know where we'd be without you. Oh my gosh, thank goodness we have you to carry those flowers because my hands are full. growth. So even though my brain is dying, my brain is still growing. Yeah, we're losing neurons. But we're also still generating neurons. If you don't believe that people who are living with dementia can still learn and grow, go to any care community and try to sit in someone's chair. Everybody knows people are still learning things. And so therefore, it is great to allow people to accomplish things for themselves as much as possible, and also create curiosity. We know that one of the ways that we keep brains healthy, we didn't talk a lot about progression and keeping brains healthy, but promoting opportunities for new neurons to build by introducing things that people are not familiar with. And that is the way that we create joy. So this is my really strong belief that rather than simply a disease, dementia has a purpose and a meaning, and just skipping to that bulleted line, that rather than a burden, people with dementia offer us an opportunity to deepen ourselves and go deeper into our souls. There is no way I would have chosen what happened to my husband, but I am incredibly changed through that experience, and in many positive ways. That's it. Thank you all. So I know that there are microphones available for people who would like to ask questions. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, over here in the front row. What's your question?
My question is, I have an aunt that has severe dementia. It came on quite well slowly through the years, but all of a sudden it went from bad to worse, all of a sudden. And when we go visit her, she's does she know what she's saying?
Okay, so the question is that when we're chatting with somebody who's living with dementia and they're word salad, right? Well, there's a man who a similar story. He and it is huge. How did you get that? Like, wow, whoa, I couldn't follow him. And so, yes, he believed that he was telling me a story because his brain heard the story, but the part of the brain that makes words come out of your mouth broke. So I believe that she still has a very intentional story that she's telling you. And so what we do is I do a lot of following the cadence, and I follow the enthusiasm, I follow the emotion. When they're pausing at appropriate times for what would be a response. And I don't mean to be condescending, and I don't mean to pander in any way, but I do a lot of, wow, oh my gosh. Tell me more, because I know that they're telling me a good story. It's just that I can't understand it. Good question. Yeah.
How much is dementia hereditary?
So each form of dementia has some genetic link. So with Alzheimer's, there are certain genes that we know make it so that you are more likely than the average person to get it, although it doesn't mean that you're going to get it. So it is, it's still fairly rare. I mean, most people don't have a genetic predisposition. A lot of dementias are like my husband's, what they call sort of a lightning strike. Like, wow, how did that happen? So there are absolutely genetic differences that can make you more susceptible, but it's not hugely common.
Thank you.
Yeah. And again, I really need to stress that if you find out that you have a genetic predisposition, it doesn't mean you're going to get dementia. It just means you are more likely to get dementia.
I have been close to 2 dementia cases, and my mother had Alzheimer's, but I had never heard the expression vascular
Yes.
dementia. What is that exactly?
So vascular dementia comes from an unhealthy cardiovascular system, and so it's somebody who is having little strokes. And so as we know, like when somebody has a stroke, it can really have significant brain damage as a result. If I'm having lots of little strokes, it starts taking out parts of my brain that result in me having a dementia. You know, I want to just base that question about the genetic. I think it's really important to just have a quick conversation about the fact that Early diagnosis is really important because there are lifestyle changes that we can make that slow progression. So before I said, wait a minute, what? I said you can't really slow down progression. Well, what we know is that there are lifestyle changes that I can make that make me less likely to become symptomatic. So, for instance, if we look at, there have been plenty of examples of people who have donated their brains, and we open up their 92-year-old brain, and it is chock-a-block full of the protein anomalies that indicate that that person had Alzheimer's disease. And yet they were completely intact. And it's because they had Alzheimer's disease, but they didn't have Alzheimer's disease with dementia. In other words, they didn't actually start losing massive amount of brain tissue. And so there's a resilience factor that makes you less likely to ever progress to a point where you're symptomatic. And so, for instance, if you were to take the brain of somebody who had a third-grade education and somebody who had a PhD, and they have exactly the same amount of tau tangles, that's one of the Alzheimer's bad guys, they have exactly the same amount of tau tangles in their brains, the person with the PhD is far less likely to become symptomatic than the person with a third-grade education. Why is that? They compensate, it's a raw materials game. Over the course of a lifetime, they have built more neurons. And so therefore they have more to lose before they become, because there's more routes, right? If I only have 3 bridges, but if I have 35 bridges, I can find a way to get to where I need to go. And so therefore, statistically, what we're seeing is that if people make changes later in life, like playing bridge, playing cribbage, taking up a musical instrument, learning a language, all of these things promote resilience. The other things that promote resilience are exercise is huge. Sleep, sorry to say, sleep is important. And I know it's harder as we get older. Sleep is important. Diet, the same things that you would do to prevent having diabetes or obesity or heart disease are the things that you would do to promote a healthy brain, in addition to this kind of brain activity that you want to keep going throughout the course of your lifetime. And a huge one is social isolation is so bad for people, and also untreated hearing loss. If you are suffering from hearing loss but you don't want to wear hearing aids, get the hearing aids. And keep them turned on. Yes, other questions? The question boils down to, how can you tell? Like, how do you know if somebody has dementia or if there's some kind of physical thing? And I will respond by saying, why does it matter? Because the reality is that so I use an example of Diana and her brother. He doesn't have dementia, he has OCD, but he behaves like somebody who has dementia sometimes. I behave like somebody who has dementia sometimes. We all do. We all can get a little bit agitated, which causes us to maybe behave in ways that we are not exactly proud of afterwards. And when other people would have had a hard time communicating with us because we're not very receptive. And so my philosophy is that whatever the challenges are, the root of them is less important than just accepting that there are challenges. So I used to work, my background is in technology. I managed the IT group at a software company. My staff were the folks who would run around and fix all the computers, and we supported hundreds of software engineers, some of who had differences, and could be a little titchy sometimes. So there was this one guy named David who was really a pain in the neck, and my entire staff hated dealing with David because he was mean, he was short, he would make them feel stupid. He behaved a lot like a person living with dementia. So my staff would say to me, they would like toss a coin, who has to go deal with David? Nobody wanted to deal with David. And what I said to them, which I really believe, and I believe that this holds true for people with dementia, is as hard as it is to deal with David, it's harder to be David. So therefore, we need to accept the fact that they are more challenged than we are. And so therefore, we have to use these big, plump, healthy brains of ours, and we need to be the problem solvers. Yeah, so if I'm not really sure what's going on with somebody and they seem like they're not really engaging very well, what would I do? engaging at all. Yeah, what I do is people ask me this, okay, so you're saying I should carry on and hang out with people. How do you spend hours or even 5 minutes with a person who doesn't answer you? How do you be with a person who cannot carry on a conversation? Well, I celebrated my 25th wedding anniversary with my husband at Anthony's, and he was nonverbal at that point. And so I did what I always do. I talked a lot. And I would say, wow, the ships, I can see the boats that are out on the water. If you look out that window, you will see that there are ferry boats. I wonder where they're going. I remember when you and I went on a ferry that time that we went up to we left from Anacortes, and then one of the kids threw up. It was amazingly horrible. So I just talk about memories, or I talk about things that I know will be engaging for that person. If it's somebody I don't know as well, I would sit and talk about common topics. Or I would just talk about me. Because imagine you being alone most of the day, nobody's talking to you. You'd rather hear about my day at work than be left not hearing about anything much of the time. And trust me, if the person living with dementia does not want to hear what you have to say, they will let you know.
Thank you so much, Allyson, for sharing your gifts.
Thank you guys.
Your experience, your ideas, your knowledge, your spirit, it's a great gift, and we thank you very much.
There are no more handouts. She did bring 4 or 5 different pamphlets. If anybody wants more information of any sort that you heard, if you just see me or Ed Hansen, we'll get a hold of Allyson and we'll get what we need and get it to you.
Can I mention these really briefly? So what I put out is for the Old Friends Club. It's an organization that hosts, it's essentially like day activities for people living with dementia. It's a place for them to go, hang out, spend the day with people who get it. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. The Fry Art Museum has amazing programs. Coming up soon is their Creative Aging Conference, which is not just about dementia. And so those flyers are out there. There were quite a few of those. Worth looking at. And then this is called the Dementia Roadmap. For somebody who has a new diagnosis, this is a really useful booklet helping you sort of understand, like, where are we going?